Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mr. Aegis, and I am your teacher for the evening. I stream first-time playthroughs and health lessons like this one. This particular lesson is especially important, one of the most important that we have given. Today, we are going to have a lesson with our friend Wreck and Cat here, who will be joining us to discuss it as well. Just wanted to let you all know that redeems and alerts, they are off for the duration of this stream, as the subject matter is pretty serious. So we want to be serious. We will begin now. There we go. Before we begin, I always start all of my streams with a brief breathing exercise. And I want you to join me because it's going to help us get centered and prepared to learn on a serious topic. It's just 1 minute. It's all I ask of your time. 1 minute for 3 breaths. See the little pink ball going around just past Wreck and Cat's head. When it's in the dark green section, it is when we are breathing in. When it's in the white section is when we'll be breathing out, or holding it. And in the light green section is where we breathe out. I want you to sit up nice and straight, but make sure you're still comfortable. I want you to unclench your jaw, roll your shoulders back a bit, put your feet flat on the floor. And then I want you to take one hand, or paw, or claw, or talon, or hoof, or whatever it is that you have on the end of your limbs, and put it on your chest. And then take the other and put it on your abdomen, because we want to feel our abdomen rise and fall, pull the air down deep into our lungs. We're going to breathe in through our nose and breathe out through our lips. When the pink ball gets to the top, we're going to begin. Follow along. Get ready. And breathe in. And hold it. And exhale. Nice and slow. Let it all out, 8 seconds. Second breath, breathe in. Hold it. And exhale. All the way out, empty your lungs. For 1 more breath. Breathe in. Hold it. And exhale. There we go. 1 minute, 3 breaths. We typically breathe about 3 or 4 times faster than that during our normal lives in the modern world. That's far faster than we should be breathing, and much more shallow. And all that shallow, rapid breathing leaves us more susceptible to stress and anxiety, increases our blood pressure, our heart rate. So it's good to do a type of exercise like this. This is a 4-7-8 exercise. Breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 7, and letting it out for 8. You can do this exercise anytime you're feeling stressed or anxious. It's good right before bed. I always do this at the start of a lesson because breathing is one of the simplest and easiest things that you can do to improve your physical and mental well-being. Thank you for following along for that. We're going to do a brief introduction of me for those of you who don't know. As I said at the top, I am a health teacher in the real world. I'm a wellness advocate. I have a whole health focus, and that means that my health lessons and my health teaching in the real world are focused on not only physical health, but social and emotional health as well. I do weekly lessons like this on topics that you see on the right side of the screen. We do health lessons about alcohol and online safety in terms of security, vaping and caffeine, overstimulation, all kinds of things that I have some expertise in. Doing this lesson today because it is a part of training that I've had throughout my master's degree that I received in health education. I have trauma-informed training practice, as well as having been in the military police, so I have some of the law enforcement aspects of dealing with child exploitation. That is why I have been asked to do this lesson today. So I will try to impart some of the things that I know, and we will hopefully provide some skill that people have in what they can do. Because what I teach is skills-based health education. Different than knowledge-based education. I'm not so much interested in whether you remember any facts and figures from my lessons, but whether you come away with any valuable skills that you can use to improve your health and wellness and safety. That's what we're going to do here. We have Wreck and Cat as well, so we'll get an introduction from Wreck and Cat.
Hello. I'm usually, hi. I'm Wrecking Cat. I'm a variety PNG tuber. I'm usually very loud and laugh a lot and very crazy. But for the purpose of today's lesson, I'm going to chill down a bit because this is super important. My shrimp voice is on? Shit. This is super important for our communities to know, and I'm really glad that Mr. Aegis could help me with this. I do a lot of Fortnite, a lot of getting high and playing video games. We have a lot of fun on my streams, but I am also a teacher. I have a master's degree, and I love helping educate people on important topics, and this is super important. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it, and afterwards you can always share the VOD with people or go back and watch the VOD. That's me.
Absolutely. And whether you like Twitch or YouTube better, they will be up on both Twitch and YouTube. Sometimes YouTube is a little easier to share with people, a little bit more accessible for people who maybe aren't gamers and don't know all about Twitch.
Yeah.
We will go to the next slide. So there we go. And of course, before we begin, I want to make it clear that we do have some challenging topics that we'll be discussing. This is a content warning. We'll be discussing issues of abuse. There may be trauma triggers that you'll experience, so I want you to watch at your level of capacity, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yep, and if you need to take a step back or anything like that, it is completely okay. Please prioritize your health. So today we're going to be talking about what is grooming. We're going to be talking about all the facets of grooming, as well as primary prevention and secondary prevention. We're going to talk about the behaviors that are seen in grooming, the signs that can tell us that there is grooming happening, how to get the victim safe, and what we can do better as a society to negate this this really terrible thing that happens.
So, yeah, go ahead. Is yours?
I gotta pull it up on mine because you're kind of covering the screen. I'm so sorry. Hold on. Okay, that's better. Okay, so what are we talking about? We are talking about grooming today. Now, what does grooming really mean? It is psychological, emotional, and social manipulation of a vulnerable person, usually by someone older, but it can also be towards the elderly, which we'll get into later. Sometimes it's also by people in a position of authority or power or influence over the victim in order to build a relationship for the purpose of exploiting that victim and abusing them. So why do they do this? There's many reasons why they do this. One of those reasons is for power and control, feeling in power and feeling a control over someone else. They feel like there's a minimization of the idea of harm. They believe that the victim is complicit towards them. Usually they will rationalize this for themselves. So they'll convince themselves that they love the victim and that the victim loves them and they're not doing any harm. And then they also, groomers have self-justification. That self-justification is belief that they are providing something for the victim.
Find that in basically all forms of abuse over children is that there is a self-justification. They believe that they are truly a loved one. So we're going to make sure that we address that.
So some of the consequences of this grooming that can happen, okay. So there are short-term harms. There's confusion and guilt these are from the victim. They are confused why this happens. They feel guilty that maybe they did something to make this abuse happen towards them. Some other short-term harms are they feel depression, they get anxiety towards these relationships and have unhealthy relationships. They begin to withdraw or isolate themselves from others, and they participate in risky coping behaviors such as substance use and self-harm.
Yes, those are some of the classic short-term harms that we see in individuals who have been exploited. Confusion can often stem from the fact that they have been involved in an unhealthy relationship. They begin to get confused about what a healthy relationship means. They'll experience guilt in believing that maybe they were a complicit party or that they led the person on. That withdrawal and isolation can come from fear of being re-victimized, and that other people are only interested in their friendship or attention because they're going to get something out of it. Some of the long-term harms that we see, of course, are PTSD or CPTSD. CPTSD is called complex PTSD. Some people confuse it with the idea of a chronic PTSD, that they think that's where the C comes from, but that is generally because CPTSD comes from traumas that occur over a period of time rather than a single incident of trauma, which in this case, abusive behaviors over a period of time is certainly something that might lead to CPTSD. That confusion and guilt and withdrawal and isolation in the short term can eventually become serious long-term trust issues. It can also lead to attachment issues. People become dependent on others. They also can develop low self-esteem from that thinking that people are only interested in them because of something that they can be gotten from them. It can also lead to body image issues, people believing that someone is only interested in them for their body. They may experience difficulties in school or work because of the mental health problems that they're having. And of course, in many cases, we find that they are at more risk of re-victimization. So, who is it that we're talking about? Who are the people engaging in this behavior, and who are they targeting? Some of the traits of abusers that we find are narcissism, as you might imagine. They feel a need for control over others because they feel superior. They may be antisocial, sociopathic, although that term is confusing. They lack remorse for what they're doing, and they are willing to engage in harming others if they get something out of it, because they tend to lack empathy. Many authority figures are typically those who we find as abusers, because with the positions of power that they have, they develop a sense of entitlement, believe that they are entitled to have authority and control over others, and that they have the authority to take advantage of others. Go ahead.
Sorry. And then the traits that they prey on, what you see typically in victims of grooming, are they have a lack of confidence, they have low self-esteem, they're typically socially isolated, they may express emotional distress such as grief or life changes that open them to this victimization. They have a disability, or they have troubled home lives.
Yes. Something that you might notice is a common thread there, that these are all people who are in positions where they may be reaching out. They may be lonely, they may be reaching out for help because they're experiencing any of these things. And so an abuser has an opening there. Someone is isolated, they tend to not have many other connections and friends, and so the abuser can fill that gap, that role. We especially find that people with disabilities can be preyed on because they are seen as more vulnerable, and they often don't have the same resources as others in society.
There are many different means that abusers can use to place themselves in positions to have access to victims. Oh, I'm moving. So one that we all know and we are all a part of, which is actually all of these. We're a part of all of these, and we should definitely be aware of this. But first and foremost, we're on Twitch. We're in a gaming platform. This gives abusers a specific interest connection. They connect with the victim. Usually the older ones, the older perpetrators, they are looking for a younger demographic and looking for a connection to place themselves in the life of this victim. There's also social media. There are tons of access on social media. In my social media places, I usually have a sense of safety, and that's held by most people. That's why we need to have awareness in our social media safety, because especially with the youths, there is a sense of safety that this social media platform is a place where they can't be harmed. Social media also gives anonymity of the abuser. They could be whoever they want and say whatever they want. People will post everything on social media, so it's also important to be sure you know what you're posting, and if you see someone that's posting stuff that may be a little too personal, maybe talk to them about that. But in social media, the perpetrator can see all of the interests of the victim, see all of their friends, and they can slowly grow a connection towards them. And then here we are in an online community. This gives them a specific interest connection. It gives them the sense of belonging with that person because they belong to the same group, they have the same interests, they have the same friends. Typically in these online communities, perpetrators, abusers, I should say abusers, have positions of status. They're important or popular in a group. They hold positions of authority, such as also an e-celebrity. They will also most likely have an inflated sense of self and entitlement.
Yes, and I think it's important with the e-celebrity since, as you mentioned, that is sort of the sphere that we're in. Parasocial connections, parasocial relationships can develop, particularly with streamers. People feel that they have a bigger connection than they really do with others. And e-celebrities, of course, they're minor celebrities, and that can give people an inflated sense of self, as you mentioned, because they really have an unwarranted position. So I'm going to talk about some of the methods that abusers use. The first one we're going to talk about is suspicious and sudden attention and favoritism. Well, this can be a little bit difficult to notice because you might genuinely meet someone new and you feel a strong connection with them right away, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a method that abusers can use. They suddenly provide a lot of attention. As we talked about, these targeted victims tend to be people who are isolated or lonely, and so that sudden attention makes them feel very special. That can lead to flattery and what's known as love bombing. Now, love bombing is something that people sort of confuse in societal perception, but this love bombing is all of this sudden and suspicious attention and favoritism with what is seen as expressions of genuine love. What they do in many cases is provide this instant and very rapid amount of attention and favoritism and love bombing, and then they will pull it back. They'll withdraw a little bit from the victim, and then the victim will feel like they must have done something wrong. They must have done something to cause the abuser to pull away and not be interested in them anymore. That will then cause the victim to be the one to reach out to the abuser, looking for that connection to be rekindled. It can be like an addiction, where someone is given a taste of all of this attention and favoritism, and then have it pulled away, feel a sense of withdrawal from it. I don't use the term addiction lightly. Talk about addictions in my lessons. Those are a specific type of disorder, but it is analogous to what happens here. Another thing that they will use is obligation building. They will begin to do things for the victim to instill in them a sense of obligation, that they owe them something. You've done so much for me, I owe you. They will also begin to isolate the victim from their social networks, from their connections with others, pulling them away from people who might notice, like we're talking about today, from the people who might notice that there is something suspicious happening. They will do what you could call wedge driving, trying to drive a wedge between the victim and the victim's friends, speaking negatively about their friends and connections, trying to get the individual to doubt the intentions of their friends, So that if one of their friends or support network people try to tell them that they feel something suspicious, the individual who is being targeted will not believe them. The abuser will try to engage in secret keeping, both getting secrets from the victim and also telling the victim secrets, making it feel like they have an even more special connection that, wow, they would share this deep secret about themselves with me, and it makes them feel like they can trust the other person with their secrets. They'll touch on a little later, that can be very dangerous. Abusers will target specific weaknesses that the individual has. As they begin to know more and more about them, particularly with those secrets that they might get, they will learn if the suspected target has any financial weaknesses, if they are in tough financial straits that the abuser can prey on by, again, building obligations. They'll begin to find out if the victim has past traumas that can be preyed on, or if the victim is in situations that make them more vulnerable, like a troubled home life or a disability that makes it more difficult for them to get work. Along with that secret keeping is the sending and getting of private information and pictures, of course, many that might be in compromising situations. And that will lead into the next step we'll talk about on the screen. They'll use things like those financial weaknesses to create reliance, even more obligation building. The victim may become reliant on the abuser for financial support or for emotional support. They will instill a sense of us versus them thinking. That is, other people won't understand. They don't understand our relationship. We have this special connection, and other people might not understand. They may try to criticize it. They may try to criticize me. This will lead the victim to begin defending the other person and feel defensive of them, so that when someone is suspicious of the relationship, the victim won't believe them. They'll think that we're in this together. Eventually, we begin to get to escalations of all of these previous behaviors. The user will begin micromanaging the life of the victim, making the victim tell them who they're with, what they're doing, when they're doing it, where they're going, how they do it. The abuser becomes more and more controlling, which makes it more and more difficult for the victim to reach out because the abuser knows all of their friends, all of their support network. They can begin to create suspicion of their friends and support network. And because they know everything that the victim is doing, where they're going, what they're doing, the abuser is able to control the information that the victim is getting. Eventually, the abuser might begin to incite the victim to do things that could make that victim feel afraid to get help. Might try and get the victim to do things that are legally or morally dubious, so that the abuser holds something over them. They can't leave the abuser because the abuser might be able to retaliate and tell everyone about these actions that the victim has taken, or expose their embarrassing pictures. We all have heard the term gaslighting, and it's a term that is not very well understood and is often thrown around without a lot of understanding by people. But the abuser, and anyone else who engages in gaslighting, uses the victim's weaknesses against them, again, telling the victim that the things that they have done, they haven't done. I haven't been controlling what you're doing or where you're going. You simply tell me those things. Threats and coercion are where we get to at the very end. When the victim does begin to engage in any implication of behaviors that they're going to leave the abuser, or the abuser feels like they're losing that control, they'll begin to think that they should threaten or coerce the victim more explicitly. They have all of these things over them. They have these secrets, they have this information, they have these pictures and messages that the victim has sent, and they can threaten to expose the victim. They can threaten that they might hurt themselves if the victim would leave them or expose them. They might threaten to hurt the person's friends or family because the victim might have told them secrets about their friends and family that the abuser could use against them. And most explicitly and most dangerously, they may threaten harm to the victim themselves.
So I'm going to talk about secondary prevention. Now, this isn't primary prevention where you're dealing with. Can you explain primary prevention one more time, Mr. Aegis?
Absolutely. So these terms come from health promotion and trying to prevent health problems are applicable here as well. Primary prevention is when you try to prevent a health issue from happening in the first place. Say you engage in exercise to prevent yourself from getting heart disease later in life. That's primary prevention. Secondary prevention is when there is some possibility of having developed or are developing an issue, like you're getting tested and you see that you're maybe pre-diabetic, so you begin to engage in secondary prevention of early detection, getting tests early, for example.
Thank you very much. Okay, so these are some external signs that you can see of these relationships, these grooming relationships from the outside. So there can be seen a dependence of the victim towards their abuser. You'll see a power imbalance in this relationship where the abuser seems to be controlling the victim. You'll see the victim needing approval from their abuser. There's also an adoption of mannerisms by the victim, such as wording, mannerisms, or other things that the other person does to make themselves feel more like the abuser and to be closer to them. You'll also see a decline in school and work performance. They'll start missing events or canceling plans, especially if you're close to someone. If this is your friend, you'll start to notice that they're missing these events and they're canceling plans with you, and you'll see a decline in the performance that they're doing and things that are important to them. You'll also, if you possibly approach them, you may see a defensiveness of this relationship if you express any kinds of concern. Some early detection is to monitor, observe, and take notes. Of course, we never want to jump to conclusions, so it's also helpful to get more eyes on the topic. So talking to other trusted people to help you, even if it's just one person or multiple people, this not only helps verify your suspicions, but it also helps you from jumping to conclusions. Finally, you want to approach the victim, not the abuser. You want to express your concern to the victim with care. You want to offer open-ended support, and you want to provide resources to the victim. And Mr. Aegis is going to talk about why we don't want to approach the abuser.
Right. The abuser will be able to get a sort of early warning that the victim might be able to recognize what's happening, because the victim recognizing what's happening is the most important first step in separating safely from an abuser. And when we talk about offering open-ended support, it's just like when you ask an open-ended question on a test. You want to offer that open-ended support in terms of if there's anything you need, for example, rather than saying, I can help you with this issue. You want the victim to feel like they can come to you with anything. You know how your parents might have said when you were growing up, you can always come to me with anything. You know, if you're at a party and you're drinking, I don't care as long as you call me and I can come help you safely. You want to offer that kind of open-ended support so that they feel like if there's anything that they are suspicious about, any issue that they might have, they can come to you as their friend.
So in the early intervention for separating the victim safely from their abuser, you want to acknowledge the problem. You want to acknowledge that there is a problem that is present, that they are a victim of this kind of abuse. You want to gather support for them, so you want to help them be aware of these friends that they have that they can trust, and also have your own friends that you can trust to help you with separating the victim safely. You want to start trying to limit the interactions with the abuser and communicate the control. So begin limiting methods of control by that separation, and also maximizing their privacy options.
So the disengaging behaviors that you want to engage in, they need to be closed-ended. When the victim is talking to the abuser in a state where they are starting to separate, when they are ready to leave the abuser, they want their communications with them to be closed-ended, saying things that have yes or no answers to them so that there's no confusion about where they stand. See at the bottom, being consistent and standing firm. Collecting and saving all of the documentation is going to be very important because if there is any doubt, the abuser is going to continue engaging in gaslighting. They can't hide from things that are documented. Messages, pictures, images, posts, anything that can be saved should be. And they should also be able to feel like they can go to a trusted friend who can save that documentation as well. If they have a moment of weakness and try to go back to the abuser, which sometimes does happen, there is still someone else who has maintained all of that. When they are ready, of course, you want to cut off completely, so that there is no possibility of that person getting back with the abuser.
And I wanted to add real quick, always make sure that you're being consistent. If you know that this is happening, don't falter on your belief after you've verified your suspicions. So make sure that you're standing firm for your belief and also for their sake.
Absolutely. When you're dealing with the perpetrator throughout and after, again, just like we were talking about in the last slide, remain disengaged. Something I wanted to also mention is while you are separating, when you're doing those closed-ended behavior, you may want to engage in what is called by some gray rock behavior, where you not only give closed-ended answers to things, but you act disinterested. You try to be as uninteresting as possible to the abuser so that they perhaps will leave you alone. If you can, when you're dealing with the perpetrator themselves, talk with the trusted members within your community, people who have influence or authority who can be trusted, because even if you as the victim or your friend as the victim doesn't want to talk about this, if they feel embarrassed about it, which certainly does happen, you can help to prevent others from being victimized by this abuser. But remember that you as the victim, you don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe people your story. People are not owed you talking about what happened to you. There's a number of reasons why people who are abused or are victims of sexual violence, for example, they don't want to testify against their abuser because they feel embarrassed. There is a societal expectation that people will talk about what happened to them. But you don't owe anyone your story. Your privacy is paramount in all of this. Yes, you might want to be able to expose that perpetrator, but you can absolutely do so in a way that doesn't talk about you specifically, so that people can see the documentation, can know that this person is an abuser, but they don't have a right to your story. Which is why that next point is important, to maintain that documentation so that you can help prevent potential victims and support them. By support them, I mean they can feel like they're not alone, that they're not stupid, that this wasn't their fault. They don't need to have guilt. Other people were possibly exploited by this abuser. Many people who are experiencing this kind of abuse, they do feel embarrassed in many ways because they feel like, how could I have been so stupid? How could I not have noticed that this person was just using me? You also want to make sure that you're aware and vigilant about retaliation from the abuser. As we talked about earlier in the methods, they try to collect secrets and information about the victim so that they can retaliate. Be aware that they may use sock puppets and accounts to get around your blocks and bans. Be aware that they may, of course, also have friends and support who would never believe that they could engage in this kind of behavior and might try to retaliate or try to make the victim feel like they are the perpetrator. But don't engage with any of these things. Cut those people off. Don't give them any opening to help defend the abuser. Try to lionize them in any way, that they are the victim of some kind of canceling. Now, when we are trying to help a person escape from the most serious, in the previous slides, we're talking about escaping from or separating from someone in those earlier stages. This is going to be the most important part. Separating after things have gotten to the most serious levels. When you've gotten to the levels where the perpetrator, user is in a physical relationship or has physical information about the person, has gotten to the level where there are threats and coercion, the victim should activate all of their support network, all of the people who can help them, and have no connection with the manipulator. You want the people who are helping you to have no possible connection with the manipulator, if at all possible, so that they have no bias. They cannot tell the abuser about anything that you or your support network is doing, try and undermine it. Again, having collected that evidence and saved it, and having your most trusted confidants having that information available as well. You want to cover yourself just before you cut off all of that access. You can erase all the contacts that you have with them, and delete and get rid of all of the things that you have said to them, any images that you have sent them. Try to get rid of anything that they can hold over you. We've talked about in the past in our privacy online safety lesson, change all of your passwords. That person knows a great deal about you. They may have been able to engage in social engineering hacking, where they can get to your passwords or accounts because they know so much about you. They know the possible answers that you have to your account recovery questions. They may know what your passwords are or be able to guess them, because people often use passwords of things that are close to them. Of course, you can also change the account names that you have. Try to confuse the person about where you're at, how they can contact you. You want to use any and all privacy options that are available to you in all of the accounts. Fortunately, some social media platforms, some communications platforms don't have great privacy options, but use everything you can at your disposal to make sure that that person can't reach you. And then 100% cut off all means that that person can contact you, can communicate with you in any way. In the immediate short term, the victim is especially vulnerable emotionally. They should stay in constant contact with their communications network, with their support network, all of the people who can help them. Because if they get alone with their thoughts, they might succumb to some of those feelings of embarrassment and guilt and gaslighting. Perhaps this was the wrong thing for me to cut them off. You'll need that support network to stay grounded and stay consistent and firm, as we talked about. You, as the third party, as the friend trying to help them, be the one to reach out to them. Don't wait for them to contact you, thinking yourself that, well, if they need my help, they'll talk to me. Be in constant contact with them. Of course, in the red bolded sections, if there is any sexual contact with you, there has been physical contact with the abuser. You need to do more than just this support network. It's time to get emergency services involved. And I know that that can feel difficult. And I know that many people have a correct, rightful fear of getting law enforcement involved. They might be members of marginalized and other communities who feel like they can't reach out to police officers or counselors and not get help. But at this point, when there is the possibility of threats being acted on, or if there has been sexual contact with the abuser, it is crucial that you get the protection that law enforcement can provide. I have listed here some of the resources that victims and third parties can reach out to if they need further help. You'll see the word child here somewhere, but that means anyone who is a minor. It means teenagers as well. Child Protective Services in any area that you live, they are responsible for people all the way up to the legal age of an adult. Can reach out to Child Protective Services or anyone that you feel might be in this emergency state, or if you are yourself a victim. You can reach out to 1-800-4-A-CHILD. This is the Stop It Now network. This is a completely confidential hotline. Your information will never go to anyone else, and it is available nationwide. You can also call RAIN, 1-800-656-HOPE. This organization is the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. If you feel uncomfortable or embarrassed about talking to someone on the phone, you can talk to someone on a hotline over the internet on a message system at hotline.rain.org, and that is also completely confidential. And yes, as someone is asking, yes, these resources are also available to adults in some cases, like RAIN. You can also reach out to the crisis text line if, again, you feel like you just want to message someone. You can text HOME to 741-741. Again, this is a 24/7 monitored support network. And they can direct you to other further resources that you need. based on your specific situation and where you live. Of course, again, if we have reached the point where there is physical contact, where the abuser knows where you live, for example, the FBI Child Exploitation Resource is a place that you should reach out to. 1-800-843-5678. They also have a cyber tip line at report.cybertip.org, where you, as the third party, if you are suspicious that someone may be in physical danger, can report this anonymously, report suspected grooming specifically for grooming. This report line can, of course, be used for anything, but they do have specific resources for minors being groomed.
I'd also like to add, if there is LGBTQ or questioning youth, there's also the Trevor Project that can be contacted. And if you need more information on them, you can let me know. So what can we do better as a society? Well, firstly, we have this public education that we are doing here, where we are trying to educate our friends, people that we know in our community, to be aware of this situation, of what it looks like, and how we can help victims and how we can verify suspicions. We want some social change. So there are norms of respect, equality, and healthy relationships. Children are not always taught what a healthy relationship is, and they can start questioning healthy relationships whenever they go through traumas like this. We want to begin challenging toxic attitudes. For example, it's quote unquote cool later on in life if your adult female teacher was in any way sexual towards a male student. But on the opposite hand, if it was a male teacher towards a female student, that's completely wrong. So we need to challenge these toxic attitudes and the media representation of inaccurate portrayals. Also, with our public education, we need it to be more effective. We need to have inclusive sex ed with trans, gay, questioning youth. They need to be able to know sex ed for their specific needs. Also, teaching autonomy, your control over your own body, and what that means and how you can keep that control. Another thing is parental resources. We need to have parents having resources about talking to children about safety and also that autonomy over their own body. And then we have a public awareness campaigns like what we're doing right now. We are bringing public awareness to this topic.
Absolutely. As a health teacher, of course, the public education aspect is something very close to my heart. And for effective inclusive sex ed, there is a lot of backlash and a lot of resistance towards providing this in society. A lot of parental groups, PTA groups, they don't want their children to receive effective and inclusive sex ed. Honestly, they will be the ones who say, I should be the only one who teaches my kid about that, and then they never do. Either they're embarrassed or they themselves don't have any effective knowledge because the sex ed that they got in school was so unacceptably, woefully poor. The things that they do tell their kids about are incorrect. Or that kid is just getting their information from their friends or their media. I had students who are taking sex ed who think, well, you can't get a disease if you have sex in a pool. The chlorine will kill it. People who believe that, well, you can't get pregnant the first time. They have these very backwards ideas because they're not getting sex ed either from their school or from their parents. The autonomy part goes into that as well a lot, because we have a sort of backwards idea of this in society. Many people think that we protect children from adults because it's wrong for adults to do this, instead of the fact that these are people who have absolute autonomy over their bodies. Children have the same autonomy over their bodies to be able to make those decisions themselves, rather than being controlled by an adult. We put the emphasis on the adult's actions and not also teaching those children that anyone who engages in behavior that you don't want, that you are not in agreement with, you can and should tell people about it. And as Cat mentioned, sex ed is also woefully under effective, for people who are LGBTQ. And again, that is a big part of the resistance to sex ed by parent groups and, unfortunately, social movements today. Professionals can help with this issue in society as well. Researchers have been and are continuing to find more and more data so that we can understand who is most at risk. Who do we need to target as a priority population because they are the ones who are being targeted and abused most? It can help us decide, well, this group has been given this particular prevention method and knowledge and education. Is it the most effective way? And we can also try and determine what factors does a person have that makes them more at risk. Obviously, doing this kind of thing, we found that people who are coming from low income, lower socioeconomic status, they are particularly vulnerable. Businesses, especially big tech, can and should do more to safeguard minors. They should be able to have effective privacy options, and as we've seen with some social media companies lately, they're not doing that, and child exploitive material continues to be circulated. Businesses should also engage in better policies and practices to support victims, people who are victimized through their social media platforms or at their businesses. And they need to hold those abusers accountable. For the government parts of this, we, you and I, and our government officials can lobby for funding these services that we talked about earlier in the resources section, providing more non-police emergency help. That is going to be critical in the future because so many people have a understandable distrust of police. There need to be options that people can reach out to, counselors, social workers, and others. And in law enforcement, a greater cybercrimes focus. There's a perception in society that while these crimes are particularly awful, they're rare, that they don't happen that often. They hear cybercrimes and they think that's something that happens far off. It doesn't happen in my community. It's not that common, but it is extraordinarily common because of the anonymity that it provides to users. I think that you should all know where your representatives stand on these issues. Find out who your representatives are. Find out what actions they've tried to take about this problem, and hold them accountable. Withhold your vote or vote for someone who has better policies and better understanding of these issues. Engage in letter writing campaigns when you see legislation that comes up that is meant to help young people.
Also, as communities and individuals, you can volunteer at local abuse shelters, you can volunteer at awareness events, and you can take on community initiatives, because this isn't just important for the person that's next to you, this is important for the other people that are in your community.
Yes, and for example, what we're doing today right here, this would be considered a community initiative, something that has been engaged in and started by members of a community who see a problem happening in that community and are the ones who most know the problems within that community. I want to make a very special emphasis on some parts of what we've talked about. It is never the victim's fault. Obviously, people say this all the time, but I want to reiterate it. It is never the victim's fault. You did not entice the abuser. You did not engage in any complicit behavior. And it can happen to anyone. You are not stupid. You did not have any kind of failing or particular weakness. These issues can happen to anyone. Adults can be groomed and have been. And many people end up getting scammed or falling victim to fraud because these are the same tactics that scammers and people who engage in fraud use, because they're effective. They take advantage of people's trust. They take advantage of people's weakness. They take advantage of building relationships. And yes, adults can be taken in too, and they are. Seniors are especially vulnerable to this. Elderly people are taken advantage of all the time, and they end up sending them all of their social security check. They start believing, well, this person has given me all this attention, and I am lonely and isolated, as many elderly people are, and will continue to be as our society becomes more and more atomized. So understanding this, responding to it, is going to become even more important in the. And lastly, these are not tactics of love. These are abuse tactics. These are the tactics that abusers have been using from the dawn of time. Just because they're happening on the internet, something that is new, that we don't necessarily understand as well the long-term effects, these are the same tactics that people have always used to try and abuse others, simply been adapted for the internet age. With all the things that we've talked about, how scary it may seem, not here to create fear. I don't want you to be afraid of your engagements and your interactions with others. I just want you to be more aware. And as the third party, as the friend, as the community member, be aware of these things, look out for them, and look out for the most vulnerable people in their community. If you have privilege, if you are in privileged positions, if you are, for example, in good financial straits, if you are not a member of the LGBT community, if you are not a minority, you have an enormous privilege, and you can be someone that reaches out, that helps people, and will be a believed voice in a community because, as we mentioned, many people who are LGBTQ, society may not believe them. People may not believe members of minority communities because in some ways, like we talked about, they're not as protected by law enforcement. But with everything that we've talked about, I want to open it up to your questions, to discussion that you may have, other points that perhaps we did not hit on earlier. Let me know the things that you want more clarification on. I'll give you some time to do that. I know there's a lag between the time that we're talking and when you're able to type things out. So we'll sit here for a moment for any questions that you have.
Mr. Aegis, I did see in your chat, it was someone, Empress Whole TV had asked if there were resources for adults, and I was looking that up. That's also the HOPE, the 800-656-HOPE. You can chat with someone there. Also, whenever you say adults, if you're talking about like elderly as well, like I personally had my grandma was sending checks and sending all this stuff to this person who she would talk to on the phone all the time, who convinced her that he was this very religious person and everything else, and she was being groomed by this young man. There are specific resources not only in your city, but also as a country, there are resources for that.
Absolutely. I think to emphasize as well for adults, many people who have disabilities, as we talked about, be targeted by abusers. They are seen as more vulnerable. And again, it doesn't matter if a person is under 18 or if they're over 18. If a person is in a vulnerable situation, they may be at risk of being victimized by someone who sees them as an easy target. Especially if we're talking about individuals who have cognitive disabilities, may not be able to understand as well that these are abuse tactics, people who are more socially isolated, who don't have the same resources as others. It is going to be especially critical that they have people in their communities who are aware of this and can help to get them resources. Yes, and Ralsei also talked about people who are neurodivergent in some way or another. I think that's especially important. Thank you for raising that, because some people who are neurodivergent may not have the same understanding of relationship dynamics, may not have the same emotional responses to things. That is something that people are beginning to more try to exploit as we become more aware of neurodivergence, which is a good thing that we are becoming more aware and more people are understanding that they may have neurodivergent tendencies or diagnoses. However, it also makes abusers more aware that there is this population out there that might be an easier target for them.
And you have a question from my chat, Mr. Aegis. So Dr. Boo asked, they said, I super appreciate you both talking about this, and they're asking what we recommend for streamers / content creators, how they can help educate or provide information on these kinds of topics to their communities.
Yes, I think a lot of streamers have the rules option when you first go to chat. I think it may be important to include that in your rules, both in your rules section and the before the chat, that if you see or notice any behaviors towards yourself or to others in your community that is suspicious to you, to please reach out to the streamer. Please let them know, reach out to the moderators. And it can be a simple message. If someone is talking to you in an inappropriate way, don't wait. Immediately bring that to the attention of moderators who can help deal with it. If it is some innocent interaction, fine. In fact, that's great. We would hope that it is. But if it is something that ends up being inappropriate, then the streamer is aware of it. They can protect their community because it is their responsibility. I, as a streamer and as a teacher, it is my responsibility to my chat as a mandatory reporter, someone who is required by law as a teacher to report any kinds of abuse that I suspect. I want to be aware of it. Tell me immediately if anything is happening within the community that you find inappropriate. Streamers can, of course, also mention this in their streams. Occasionally talk about it. If there are incidents that arise, like the incident that you heard about, that you told me about, that means it's a pretty good time to talk about it again. It is on people's minds. It is something that they're thinking about. You can capitalize on the fact that while people are thinking about it right now, it's being talked about in the community. Let's make sure that we mention it at the top of a stream.
Yep, and that's one reason why I wanted to have this here. I also personally have contacted everyone in my community to let them know that this has happened. Also, other streamers that I know that had this victim and this perpetrator in their community, I let them know. But definitely, I agree with Mr. Aegis, and I'm going to put this in my chat rules and make it more prevalent about reaching out to me or any of my moderators, but especially me, if they feel in any way uncomfortable during my streams. I never want that. I never want anyone to ever feel uncomfortable, and I definitely want to make sure that I am taking the necessary steps to take out people who make other people feel oh my gosh, that I am removing people who make my community uncomfortable, because this is our safe place and this is where we want to be together. And that's another reason why we added in those signs that having a community like this where you feel safe in that community and you're like, oh, this other person is in my community, so they must be okay. And you don't realize that these things could be going on. So I agree with Mr. Aegis in adding that. Dr. Boo, you can also add that into your community. Dr. Boo had one more thing. She said, as a pelvic floor physical therapist, I can agree the lack of sex ed is very prevalent, and I have to educate basic facts often. I feel like as a healthcare worker, there are more established ways to educate, but sometimes as a streamer, it can be hard to navigate these kinds of topics.
Absolutely. I feel like again, we talked about privilege, people who have a position in society, but also people who have more knowledge. People who are, for example, healthcare workers or teachers. We know about these things. It is, again, our responsibility. We have the privilege of having knowledge and skills in how to deal with this, and we can impart those to others. And a part of why I use skills-based education rather than knowledge-based. And I want to mention about talking about creating inclusive communities. It's not just about dealing with the most problematic behaviors, but sometimes behaviors that people engage in that aren't even seen as perhaps that serious, that can be changed to make the community more inclusive. I had an incident very early in my streaming career. I've been streaming less than a year, so it's not that long. But early on, there was an individual who was in the chat. I hadn't seen them before. They were a first-time chatter. They had just come in. First time they had been discussing things in our chat. We were playing a game where people were calling other people crazy. It wasn't like we were talking about that. It was in the game. The dialogue was talking about mental illness in a way that was flippant, and this individual felt uncomfortable with that. I was using the word crazy, just repeating it from the dialogue, and they said that they were uncomfortable with that. They said, I don't feel comfortable. They actually said the words, I don't feel comfortable, because people are making light of mental illness. And people in the chat heard that and said, well, don't be dramatic. It's not that big a deal. It's just a game. And they left. I never saw that person again. Because I didn't see the chat early enough, and by the time I had looked over at the chat to see it, they had already left. Who knows what I might have been able to do to help that person out. Maybe they would have become a member of the community and would have learned a great deal and had their life enriched. But I think that's a good comment on our words. The tongue is a most powerful weapon, and it can be used either for good or for ill. A single comment can raise someone's spirits, and a single comment can desolate someone. I've used the example of, you cut someone off in traffic and you flip them off and you yell at them through your car, and it makes them think about it all day. They feel bad throughout the day. Maybe they don't call that person that they were interested in. Maybe they don't do well in their job interview that they had later that day. You'll never really know what ripple effects that your actions have when you comment towards people, if you are mean-spirited. So try to control your tongue, even when other things are happening that are not as serious as grooming. Taking care of problematic or toxic behaviors in your community, even if they seem innocent, you can just comment on them in a friendly reminder. Hey, let's be respectful. Let's be respectful of this person who is uncomfortable with the topic that we're having. I think that's also something that we can do.
I want to speak just for a moment on what you said about just out and about in the community. So I have a perfect anecdote. Yesterday, so I'm back in my hometown, and there is so much construction going on, and one of the lights. So one of our big roads has like traffic cones, and like the traffic is very confusing. And at this one light, usually it's 2 lanes and one of them turns. Well, I haven't been here in a long time, and so I didn't realize that this was now a turn only lane, and I needed to go straight, and it was gonna, the turn only lane was gonna lead me out of town. And so I had my blinker on and I was waiting, and I personally have been around people, especially like some of my family, who have very bad road rage. Like, oh, this person should have known and they shouldn't have done that. Well, not everybody knows. Everybody makes mistakes. I would like to say that I'm a very good driver, but I felt really dumb when someone started honking at me behind me, and it makes you feel bad about yourself, and it's like, I made an honest mistake. I'm in no way trying to rush into traffic or do anything like that. I am treating it how I need to, and I feel like it's very important, even just a small story like this, to just think about what other people are going through, that not everybody has the same knowledge, and to approach people with an open mind instead of assuming immediately that they should have known better, or that they have the same knowledge as you, because not everybody has the same knowledge. If you I saw something in your chat, if you wanted to talk about that, or I can, from Anomalous.
Yes, Anomalisa Keys, or just Anomalous.
Okay, Anomalisa Keys said, abuse and grooming are definitely not drama. They were referring to Empress Whole TV, and they said, and I dislike when people treat it that way. I also feel the same way, Anomalous. Not referring to you, Anomalous says, just it's much bigger than that. And Empress said, should I believe in all victims of abuse? I would like, I guess, more clarification on what do you mean by should I believe in all victims of abuse? Because I feel like if someone feels they are a victim, or someone is a victim, you should definitely believe in them. But I could be misconstruing, because this is text versus speech. So what do you think?
Yes, I think until proven otherwise, then you should believe them. In fact, believing them is the first step in looking at what happened. If you don't believe them in the first place, then you're not going to make a concerted effort, not going to make a good faith effort to find out what happened, to see if you can help them, to see if you can help hold the abuser accountable. So yes, I think it is important. I think there was some backlash to the Me Too movement where people said, well, you shouldn't believe everyone. Well, you should believe that the person has said this, and that you need to, at the very least, look at it.
Yes, with the incident that happened recently in our community, I can say that there were a few people who were close to the abuser who were, I feel like, in a sense, gaslighting by saying, this is just drama, you need to drop this, I don't see what you're talking about, even when the evidence is presented to them. So in this, even going through this with Mr. Aegis, seeing that, cutting those ties with people that are close to the perpetrator, because you can give them the facts, but people are going to believe what they're going to believe, and it's not healthy for you to try to change someone else's mind. That's on them to change their mind. All you can do is educate people on what you see, and sometimes it's opinions, sometimes it's facts, but trying to, like, having documentation. We had a lot of documentation on this grooming that happened in our community, having documentation and presenting that, but in the end it's really up to other people.
Certainly.
um,
I think it
I have
also
some
helps
more in
to
chat.
I think it also helps to nip behaviors in the bud. In some cases, maybe the person doesn't understand that their behaviors are inappropriate. Maybe they don't really know. And if you educate that person, then you're going to help prevent problems in the future. Sometimes behaviors are innocent, but if a person feels uncomfortable with them, then they still need to stop that. And if you don't believe people within your community, then people in the future are going to be less likely to come to you. And perhaps a situation that you don't take seriously is something that ends up being innocent, in which case, great. I would rather have it be innocent. But if you don't believe that person in the first place, someone who does end up being victimized might not feel like they can come to you. They might remain isolated. And if you don't address toxic behaviors in your community, members of your community are not going to feel like they can come to you or to moderators or to trusted members of that community with any problems that they have.
Raven said in chat, other than giving warning and or banning someone from the stream, is there anything else or more that one can do to protect yourself and others from possible promiscuous teens who like to approach adult communities and engage in adult topics willingly? I feel ultimately we cannot control what anyone does. Like, again, that autonomy of people controlling what they do with themselves and what they do with their body. I personally, ever since this has happened, I stress whenever I have like new people who follow. I even have a timed bot in my chat that says these are 18 plus topics. In my title I say this is 18 plus topics. I try as much as I can. It's in the chat rules. I say, hey, if you're not 18 or over, you need to get the hell out of my chat, because I don't want you like exposed to things that are not safe for you, or like, I want to keep my community safe because I don't want them interacting with the like underage youth who are in my community that shouldn't be. So that's how I personally handle it. What do you think, Mr. Aegis?
I think that is the correct way to handle it for streams that are 18 plus. So we have two different perspectives here because we have two different types of streamers, which is great. So we both get both sides of this. Of course, what I do is sort of, there's a word in the VTuber community for wholesome or safe for work type stuff. I don't know. I'm sort of separated from the rest of the VTuber community. I don't know anything. I live under a rock. But for what we do here, all of my lessons and things that I talk about are for all ages. Like this topic. This is a topic that minors should need to hear about. These are resources that they may need. This is information about problems they may experience. So, as an all ages streamer, I have a particularly strong responsibility to monitor the things that happen in the chat, within the community, in the Discord, on my Twitter account, anywhere that I have control over. My responsibility to be the responsible adult. And if you are the streamer, or if you are the adult in a community that is all ages, having other trusted individuals that you can talk to, it's very much the same. You want to have a support network and other trusted adults that you can go to and say, I believe that there is some inappropriate behavior happening with this minor member of the community, so that there isn't any confusion or misunderstanding, that both of you, the streamer, the other trusted members of the community, the moderator, understand there is perhaps inappropriate behavior happening by a minor, so that there can't be any misunderstanding if something happens.
Yeah, so definitely two different sides of the spectrum, and I know most of the people in my community participate in 18 plus communities. So honestly, it's our responsibility as the streamers to lay down these rules to make sure our moderators know, to make sure that it's very prominent, because this is a platform where younger people lie about their age and join places, but there's only so much that we can do, and the rest of it is up to hopefully parental education. That's why we definitely want to push that education and the sex ed. But there's only so much that we can do, Raven, as the streamers and as the leaders of our communities.
Say so. Say so is the term, I believe.
Say so. What is
The SEISO, I think that's what streamers, VTubers call themselves when it's sort of wholesome content. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what Bird said in chat. Bird said, "Are you talking about say so?" And I thought they were talking about a person. Okay, so yeah, say so.
Yeah, so we have a say so community here.
And Boo, yes, we will be publishing this video. Aegis will have it on their stream. I'll have it on my stream as a highlight that will stay forever. And then Aegis will also be publishing it to YouTube as well. So I will add these in. I'll probably make a new thing in my profile for just the education, and just kind of make like how you have it about me in our profile for streamers. I'll probably just make something in there and talk about, like, hey, this is a topic, this are the links, and here are the resources, because I feel like since this is something that happened under my nose, and it makes me, as a teacher who the reason why I got into teaching is to protect children and to teach them, and I am also a mandatory reporter. Finding out that something like this was happening, I got very angry, and but also with that anger was this confusion of, I don't know how to handle this specific topic. So I feel like it'll be important for me to add these resources, and also I feel like it's helpful to reach out to those who were also affected by this, to let them know. And that's why our dear friend Beanie, who's at work now, I would like to thank Beanie personally for coming out with this information, and also that, like, I want us to make sure that we are sending love to those who were affected by this. And you never want to minimize, like what was it, Angel said, if someone says they're being abused, why would you doubt them? Why would you say, what makes you think that? Like, you want to make sure that you are giving them the benefit of the doubt, and always make sure that you are listening, because if someone approaches you, and obviously they feel comfortable with you if they are approaching you, and if you turn them away or you make them doubt themselves in any way, that's not the way to deal with the situation. The way to deal with the situation is to get all the facts and to listen with an open heart, so that way you can find out how you can help this person. And I don't know what more to say. I'm a little rambling.
Yeah,
right
I think
now.
that's a good point in terms of, if you doubt the person, it's only going to feed into the gaslighting that the abuser is doing. It is going to reinforce the idea that, am I the crazy one? Is it just me? You're reinforcing the notion that the abuser will be putting into the person's mind.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions? I didn't check your chat.
Yes, certainly. If there are any other questions, if you have anything that you want to clarify, or comments, concerns, I hope that I have been thorough. Did want to be as thorough as I could with what I know. Over the course of the last few days when I was putting this together, I kept wondering, am I going to get everything? I don't want to leave anything out because this is so important. But I think we were able to hit on all of the important topics. And I did want to reinforce, and I'm going to go back to the resources page so that people can, if they want to, screenshot this, or we'll just have this up more in the VOD. My VOD will be on YouTube as well. As we mentioned, Bit Shepherd, I think we'll put up a link to that with all of our prior lessons. I will probably also make a short version of this for TikTok, because I know people sometimes have short attention spans, but I will probably try to do one that just sort of gives brief lesson on the behaviors and these resources.
And Empress, you said in chat that you don't know what grooming looks like, and if you should believe the victim said, and hear what the other side said, if it's true or not. If you watch through this video after we do it again, we definitely went through all the steps of what it looks like, and as far as approaching, we recommend approaching the victim, not the abuser. Aegis can speak again on why you would approach the victim first, because it gives that abuser that oh, you have an ad. It gives that abuser the
A sort of heads up, because
yes.
Something I want to make clear, the time that I was in law enforcement, you notice that there is a pattern of behavior for people who, well, the term sociopath isn't the correct parlance today, but people who are sociopaths, I could have written it on an envelope and sealed it up before I asked the person the question or brought up the issue to them. If you talk to someone who is like that and you say, I found this thing out, I have this information about you, I know that you have done this thing, you can predict, you could bet on it, that the first thing out of their mouth will be some form of, who told you that? Where did you hear that? Because they want to undermine the source. They want to undermine where you got that information from. So you want to make sure that you get everything you can from the victim, and also get that support from other trusted members of the community, so that if you do confront or talk to the abuser later on, there's no misunderstanding. They can't hide or run away or gaslight. So yeah, that's why you get all of the information you can first from the victim and anyone who may have also seen suspicious behaviors. Because it is unlikely that it's only going to be the victim who has seen or experienced something from that individual. Sometimes abusers will sort of throw out a fishing net and try to sort of see who bites at their attention. So others in your community may also be able to tell you and confirm, yes, I have also seen suspicious behavior from this person.
So I have a question from Angel. She said, what if an abuser is well liked and seems like a great person?
And that is a serious question, and a part of why they will try to get the victim themselves to make statements supporting them, to be defensive, so that they can go back and say, well, look at what the victim said themselves. They said I was a great person. That is why the documentation is so important, especially another reason, especially why you talk to the victim first and don't approach the abuser, so that they can't delete anything. They can't get rid of anything that might implicate them. And when you are talking to them and they are well liked, you want to not take the word of anyone who is a friend. You want to listen to the victim and the information they have, and others in the community who have been suspicious or had concerns about this individual. It can be difficult if they are popular and well liked, especially as you get into more and more bigger and bigger celebrities. We're in our community, we're talking about VTubing and streaming. It is why it has been so difficult for victims to come forward, because they know that they might experience harassment and retaliation from a person's community, all their followers. They can have their followers sicked on them. But that's just another reason why so many victims don't come forward. Again, another reason why you believe victims. People will almost never want to put themselves through all this. Why would they put themselves through the stress and the strain and the potential embarrassment and all of the trouble that it will cause to say that they were a victim of abuse? They aren't going to do that. You believe the victim because there isn't a reason not to. So it may end up being that it isn't, and nothing comes of it, but you believe the victim first. And if the person is popular and they have a lot of support, it's still not going to stand up when there is evidence of their abusive behaviors. Empress has a question. What are your thoughts on predator hunters? Are they good or bad? The awareness that they can bring to the issue can be valuable. However, methods that they use can sometimes lead to greater problems. It can sensationalize the issue, and it can make victims feel like, well, if I try to call for help, I'm going to end up in some big, published, maybe streamed issue situation where I'm not going to have my privacy respected. We talked about earlier, privacy is paramount. The victim doesn't owe anyone their story. Predator hunters will often be doing this for clout, for attention, to grow their follower base. They're not necessarily doing it for the best interests of the community or the best interests of the victim, because they're willing to expose the victim and the situation that they've been in. So people might be able to do that in a way that brings attention to it, but it also sensationalizes and creates a sense that this is a scandalous thing that is interesting to watch. It's like those true crime shows where, oh, this is just entertainment. Well, no, these are tragedies. These are terrible things that have happened. They're not there for your consumption or to capitalize on and to make ad revenue from.
I feel like personally, also, that was a really great response. But personally, Angel, I do feel like that is a more challenging situation whenever the abuser is well liked and quote unquote seems like a great person, because that's the front that they give, that's their in. So following all these steps is very crucial, and making sure that you have support with you. Um, Bird and Boo would also like to thank us, Aegis, mainly you because you did most of this, but that this was definitely grad school level, and they want to thank us for sharing our time and your experience with us.
I'm very grateful that I was able to do this and use the information that I have been privileged to learn and the skills that I've been able to develop in different roles that I've had. Because if I don't do that, then it's all been for naught. All of the things that I've learned and had the ability to do, if I'm not using it for good, then what was the point? But I hope that it has been effective and that you've learned some skills on how to deal with this issue and the knowledge to recognize when these behaviors are happening to help protect yourself and others.